Welcome to another deep dive. You've given us quite the task this time, exploring the very essence of British identity. To help us unpack this, we're turning to excerpts from a research document aimed at Year 6 students. Don't let that fool you, though. This source cleverly breaks down complex ideas with clarity and even encourages some pretty deep thinking.
It's fascinating how they managed to achieve that.
Mm.
By structuring the information in a way that a Year 6 student can grasp, they've actually created a fantastic foundation for us to build on. It's accessible, yet still leaves room for nuanced discussion.
Okay, so let's jump right into this historical recipe, as our source calls it. You can't understand what it means to be British today without understanding where it all began, right? And it all starts way before those iconic red telephone booths and double-decker buses. We're talking woolly mammoths, roaming free hunter-gatherers navigating the landscape.
That's right, it all starts with that deep-rooted connection to the land. It's a reminder that these islands have a human story stretching back millennia. And then come the Celts, who left a lasting marks not just through their fierce warrior culture, but also through the Celtic languages that are still spoken today, like Welsh and Gaelic.
Ah, the Celts. Those enigmatic figures often shrouded in myth and legend, but their impact on British identity is undeniable. And then, bam, the Romans march in, bringing with them their incredible engineering prowess, their systems of law and governance. Talk about a cultural shakeup.
It's amazing how they managed to integrate their own systems without completely erasing the existing Celtic culture. Take Hadrian's Wall, for example. It's not just a physical barrier, it's a symbol of the Roman influence on the landscape, a reminder of their efforts to define and control their territory.
And what's interesting is that this Roman influence wasn't a one-time event. It laid the groundwork for future interactions, for how different groups would come to shape the islands. Case in point, the Anglo-Saxons. They established kingdoms, lay the foundations of the English language. It's like watching the building blocks of Englishness coming together.
But remember, the Anglo-Saxons didn't arrive on an empty stage. Their culture intermingled with the existing Roman and Celtic influences, leading to a complex process of assimilation and adaptation. It's a crucial point because it underscores the ongoing theme of cultural exchange that runs throughout British history.
And just when things are settling down, cue the dramatic music, the Vikings. These weren't just fierce raiders, they were also skilled traders and navigators. And while they didn't conquer the whole of Britain like the Romans, their influence, especially in the north, is undeniable. Place names ending in Appleby words like skull and knife. It's like they sprinkled their language into the mix.
Exactly. And their arrival wasn't simply about imposing their own ways. They, too, interacted with and were influenced by the existing Anglo-Saxon and Celtic cultures. It's a constant push and pull, a layering of influences that makes understanding British identity so complex and fascinating.
And then, of course, the big one, 1066, the Norman Conquest. William the Conqueror and his Normans sweeping in, bringing with them their castles, their cathedrals, their French words. Suddenly, Britishness takes on a whole new flavor.
And it wasn't just about military dominance. This Norman conquest triggered massive social, political, and cultural shifts that still resonate today. Think about it, the very language we're speaking right now has been irrevocably shaped by that event.
It's mind-boggling to think about how these historical events, these different groups, all contributed to the melting pot that is British identity. But our source is quick to point out that it's not just about battles and conquests, right? There's more to Britishness than just dates and names.
Absolutely. It's about the less tangible elements, the things you can't pinpoint on a map or timeline, those cultural elements that add depth and texture to the story. Things like language, food, music, art. These are the threads that weave together a more complete picture of British identity.
So let's talk about what makes British culture so unique. What does a British person sound like? Well, it's not just about the Queen's English. We've got those vibrant Celtic languages still spoken today, Welsh, Gaelic, Scots. They're a living link to pre-English cultures, reminding us that the story goes back much further than just the Anglo-Saxons.
And those languages aren't just remnants of the past. They're active, evolving parts of British culture, contributing to its richness and complexity. It's a good reminder that identity is never static, it's always in flux.
Right. It's like this living tapestry with new threads constantly being woven in.
That's right.
And speaking of things that are constantly evolving, let's talk about British food. You can't talk about Britishness without mentioning fish and chips. There's something about those perfectly golden, crispy pieces of fish and fluffy chips that just screams, Britain!
Indeed. And it's not just about the taste. Think about those cozy pubs, the seaside atmosphere. Food becomes an experience, a way to connect with the culture on a deeper level. And of course, there's the Sunday roast, a ritual that brings families and friends together around a table laden with roasted meats and Yorkshire pudding and all the trimmings.
It's like a culinary hug, isn't it? And let's not forget afternoon tea, those delicate sandwiches, scones with clotted cream and jam, a steaming pot of tea. It's elegant, it's quintessentially British, and it's a tradition that continues to evolve with modern twists and flavors.
What's fascinating is how these traditional dishes coexist with the incredible diversity of cuisines you find in Britain today. From Indian curries to Chinese takeaways, from Italian pizzas to Turkish kebabs, British food has become a fusion of global influences, reflecting the multicultural nature of modern society.
It's like the best of all worlds. And speaking of cultural fusion, let's move on to music. British musicians have had a massive impact on the global music scene. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Queen, David Bowie, Adele, Ed Sheeran, the list goes on and on. It's a musical powerhouse that constantly pushes boundaries and reinvents itself.
What's striking is the sheer variety of genres that have originated in Britain. From punk rock and heavy metal to grime and drum and bass, British music is a testament to the country's creativity, innovation, and willingness to experiment. It's a melting pot of styles and influences, constantly in dialogue with the rest of the world.
It's almost impossible to define British music because it's so diverse and dynamic. And the same can be said for British art. From the dramatic landscapes of J.M.W. Turner to the pop art of David Hockney, British art is a visual feast reflecting a rich history of artistic expression and innovation.
And like music, British art draws inspiration from various cultural layers, representing a tapestry of styles and perspectives. It's a powerful lens through which to view the country's evolution and the diverse voices that have contributed to its artistic heritage.
So we've got this incredible history, this vibrant culture, but what about the glue that holds it all together? The values, the principles that underpin British society?
That's a key point, because Britishness isn't just about external expressions. It's also about the internal compass, the values that guide behavior and shape societal norms. And the source lays out some core values that are considered fundamental to British life.
First up, the rule of law. This idea that everyone, regardless of their background or status, is equal under the law, that justice is blind, is crucial. It creates a level playing field, a sense of fairness that underpins so much of British society.
And this emphasis on the rule of law is reflected in the British legal system, which is based on common law. This means judges base their decisions not only on written statutes, but also on previous rulings, ensuring a degree of consistency and predictability in legal matters.
It's fascinating how the past influences the present, how this tradition of common law shapes the legal landscape even today. And then there's individual liberty, that deeply ingrained belief in personal freedom, the right to make your own choices and live your life as you see fit.
This value is at the heart of British identity, but it also comes with a sense of responsibility. It's not about absolute freedom to do whatever you want, but about a balance between individual liberty and the well-being of society as a whole.
Right. It's about recognizing that your actions have consequences and that individual freedom can't come at the expense of others. It's a delicate balance, but one that's constantly being negotiated in British society.
And then there's democracy, which is more than just a system of government. It's a way of life, a belief in the power of the people to shape their own destiny, to hold their leaders accountable.
It's about having a voice, about participating in the decisions that affect your life. And that's reflected in the structure of British Parliament, with its two chambers, the House of Commons and the House of Lords, working together to represent the people and enact laws.
What's interesting is that these values, rule of law, individual liberty, democracy, aren't static concepts. They're constantly being debated, challenged, and reinterpreted in the context of modern Britain. They're living principles that evolve alongside society itself.
It's an ongoing conversation, a constant process of figuring out what these values mean in practice, how they apply to the challenges of the 21st century. And finally, there's mutual respect and tolerance. This is especially crucial in a diverse society like Britain, where people from all walks of life, from all corners of the globe, come together.
It's about recognizing that difference is a strength, that a society is enriched by the contributions of people from various backgrounds, beliefs, and experiences.
It's about creating a space where everyone feels welcome and valued, where differences are not just tolerated but celebrated. It's about building a society where everyone feels like they belong.
And this brings us to a really intriguing point that our source highlights. The idea that British identity is even more complex when you consider the multicultural nature of modern Britain. It acknowledges that the traditional image of what it means to be British is evolving.
It's like we've been laying out all these different pieces of the puzzle: history, culture, values, and now we're adding another layer, the layer of modern multiculturalism. It makes you realize that Britishness isn't just about being born on these islands anymore. It's about embracing the incredible diversity of experiences, backgrounds, and perspectives that shape the nation today.
Exactly. And the source touches on some of the main ethnic groups that make up Britain: white British, Asian British, black British, and mixed ethnicity. What's interesting is that it doesn't just list these groups, it actively highlights their contributions to society, acknowledging the richness and dynamism that this diversity brings.
It's like that historical recipe we were talking about earlier, but with even more flavors added to the mix. And it's not just about ethnicity, it's about religious diversity as well.
Absolutely. The source mentions Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Sikhism, Judaism, Buddhism, all these faiths coexisting and contributing to the cultural and social fabric of Britain. It's a testament to the idea that a society can be both unified and diverse, that shared values can exist alongside a tapestry of different beliefs and practices.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The source points out this fascinating fact. Research suggests that people from ethnic minority backgrounds sometimes identify as exclusively British more than those of white British origin. That really makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
It certainly challenges assumptions. It suggests that perhaps those who have chosen to make Britain their home, who have actively embraced British values and integrated into British society, feel a particularly strong connection to their adopted nation.
It's like they've made a conscious decision to be part of this national story, and that, in a way, strengthens their sense of belonging.
Precisely. And this speaks to the idea that Britishness isn't about bloodlines or ancestry. It's about a shared sense of identity, a commitment to the values and ideals that define British society.
So, after this incredible deep dive, we're left with a sense that British identity is far from simple. It's multi-layered, constantly evolving, and open to interpretation. But one thing's for sure, it's a fascinating journey through history, culture, and the human experience.
And the journey doesn't end here. British identity is an ongoing conversation, a dynamic process of shaping and reshaping what it means to be British in the 21st century.
And on that note, we want to hear from you. What resonated with you most in this exploration of British identity? What surprised you? What questions are you left pondering? Share your thoughts with us on social media or drop us an email. We're always eager to hear your perspectives. And join us next time as we deep dive into another fascinating topic.